This is like a script. It's not a game script.
Right.
It's a script.
Fuck the Oscars, you know? Fuck the Oscars! Fuck you!
Because the most subtle nuances of emotions could be seen on screen. With the PlayStation 4, games have now finally reached that stage.
Welcome to the Citizen Game podcast where myself, Ryan, and my dear friend George go through all the video games and prove why they are why you should demolish the Sistine Chapel and replace it with an N64.
An N64. Yeah, with Ocarina of Time. You would put that...
Yeah, obviously.
The Temple of Time instead of a
They
church.
should blow up the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica and everything in Rome and replace it with recreations of Zelda universe locations.
Yeah, I was personally trying to do that with Notre Dame. That was all me.
Oh, that was what you were trying to do when you lit it on fire?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Before we switch over to talk about Abby's story, I just want to run over a few things that I missed in the first half. Actually, just one thing, really, which is we talk about the fucked up kill of Ellie killing the poor Hotline Miami girl.
Yeah, who looks like she's like 16.
Yeah.
And is just playing video games.
How callous she is.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking about, like, is this the... I do think it's not just like a reference. It is like a hint of like, hey, this is what we're doing with this game.
Yes.
And I was like, is that the first time I've seen that in a video game? Like, I think about this with... remember Logan, the X-Men movie?
Yes.
And we were just like, it kept like just quoting
Showing Shane constantly. Having to watch Shane in the movie constantly.
Yeah, just as like a little, hey, this is what we're doing in case
this
you
is
didn't
a Western, and it's about a man whose life is defined by violence, just like Shane.
So I thought it was interesting, just the fact of like referencing a video game in that way. To specifically, I think it's specifically saying this is what we're about. And what I mean by that is when Hotline Miami came out, have you ever played it?
No.
It's pretty fucking great. When it came out, there was a whole bunch of people talking about is this critiquing violence, and basically there was one line that goes, do you like hurting people? And my argument and other people's argument has always been, okay, that's one of three questions the game asks you at the beginning. It's like, do you like hurting people? Who the fuck is calling you on the phone? And what is even going on? All that to just say that I never thought Hotline Miami was really critiquing violence. It was just... It's a hypnotic game that maybe has you sit with the violence and feel uncomfortable, but never directly condemns you as a person like Spec Ops: The Line. And I can't help but feel like, yeah, that's the kind of thing Last of Us 2 is going for.
Right.
And
I don't think... Because it's not a meta-level critique of the player.
No. I guess we could talk more about that with the Polygon article, but
yeah,
I just wanted to note that
we
was
discussed the
interesting.
themes at the end.
Yeah,
because I'm trying to think, because you brought up the point of that kind of intertextuality where it's like, hey, this other work with these similar themes. I can think of examples of that in other, like Watchmen.
Right, the comic within the comic, the pirate.
Right, the comic
thing.
within the comic, but I specifically mean, well, because the comic within the comic is made up. That's not real.
Yeah.
But the comic within the comic's name is The Black Freighter, which is a reference to a song in the Threepenny Opera by Bertolt Brecht. And also, I believe in Watchmen there are posters for The Day the Earth Stood Still in New York, which is, of course, about an alien coming down to Earth and deciding whether they'll inevitably destroy each other with nuclear weapons. which certainly has obvious thematic resonance to Watchmen. And of course, they also reference at the end of the book the Outer Limits episode that Moore stole the entire twist from, called The Architects of Fear.
Interesting. Of course, the most intellectual version of this is Don Cheadle and fucking... Oh my god. Fucking dumbass Adam Sandler. Adam Sandler and Don Cheadle in Reign Over Me playing Shadow of the Colossus.
You've seen Reign Over Me?
No. I just know
good. Thank God.
just know that that's what happens in the movie.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So I think we talked about, Jesse gets got, and now we're switching. We start off with, this is where they lay it the fuck on. They lay it on you thick. It's like, look, Abby's a person. She saves zebras with her cool dad, and this just feels, well, like I said, like they're laying it on thick.
They are. But there's an obvious degree to which that's necessary, because Ellie, we got a whole game with her last time. So at the start of this game, Ellie has a huge advantage in terms of audience sympathy. So if we want Abby to be not equally or at least on the same level of sympathy, we've got to lay it on thick.
I know. To me, mm-hmm. At least that first part, like, it once it gets going and you're more in the current timeline, I think it starts going pretty good. But it really came across, I don't know, it almost came across silly. The parallels, the fucking parallels of everything.
Right. Because Abby, the big twist with Abby is that her father was the doctor in Salt Lake City, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, in Salt Lake City, who was going to operate on Ellie and kill her and try to extract and synthesize a cure for, or a vaccine or something for the fungus plague that is turning people into zombies. And that means that her father is technically the final boss of the first game. Because the last enemy you kill in Last of Us 1 is the doctor who attacks you with a scalpel and who you have to just shoot as Joel.
If you really want to stretch the definition of final boss, but sure.
He is the last enemy you kill.
Or that's unless if you kill the other nurses that are optional.
Oh yeah, I guess you could just shoot everyone in that room.
This is another. But this is a risky
you kill
thing.
Him. You kill him in the first game.
Yeah, it's
the player killed him.
Yeah, and there's no. It won't let you. You walk around him. You can't
shoot him
walk
in the leg.
around him.
He dies.
Or you press square and he does like an animation where he shoves the fucking scalpel in his throat.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Or so this is what I want to talk about. Just as just as the basic shit. This is a hard thing to do, or a risky thing.
Why?
Because you can kill him by setting him on fire with a flamethrower, and to me, it's that. How do I put this? It's so obviously retconned. Not that that's a problem, but I look at it and I see the writing.
Right.
I see them having to come up with this.
Fun fact: his character model is actually Asian in the first game.
Interesting,
because it's a generic enemy character model that they just put his surgical mask on. He didn't have. That's proof that this is not planned. I don't know if it's retconned.
Yeah, sorry. I guess that's what I'm
that
saying, and of course it's who gives a fuck if it's not planned? But I guess just the obviousness of it, the fact that it was clearly just supposed to be a throwaway thing, the fact that you can kill him in a goofy way by shooting him in the foot or something, it's
hang on. The fact that it was a throwaway thing is the point.
That's true.
Like, you are Joel in the first
but that's
game.
what makes it
And you
like
killed
silly
this
to
guy.
me, though.
What?
That's
That's
what
the point. No.
No, I know that's the point. I'm just saying that. Again, I'm comparing to the first one where it's like, oh my god, imagine if a random guy, he had a family or something like that. And just, this is like the aspect where I feel like the first game didn't need to be expanded on. It's like, we know it was bad. I don't need to be told that these people had kids that also had hopes and dreams and shit. And again, when I was talking about the first game, it's like, well, what if there was like another father and daughter? And it's like, well, they kind of cover that with Sam and Henry more briefly. That it's like the same sort of themes. And that's where I'm just not sold on the whole direction that they decided. Okay, I'm not sold in the parallels, in the whole themes of, dads and oh, we're just killing each other. And what I wanted to get to is that the game...
Hang on, can I say something?
Please.
Okay, the whole point is that he was just, as Joel, you killed him without thinking about it. It reminds me of, have you ever read the comic The Invisibles?
No, I'm sorry.
So in the first issue of that comic, the main character, the superhero sort of team of the Invisibles rescues the main character from a facility. And during the breakout, they shoot some random guard. And then the 12th issue of The Invisibles is entirely dedicated to that guard's life story. Who has obviously not been mentioned and is literally faceless because he's wearing a riot shield when they shoot him. But then the entire 12th issue is just devoted to, from childhood, his life story and his daughter and his time in the Falklands War and all this shit. And then it ends with obviously just some asshole in a mask just walking up and shooting him in the head. And the point there is obviously that it's a meta point about how certain characters are considered disposable, when in reality, no one is like a background character. And I think that they're aiming at a similar point.
And I would say that they missed it.
Why did they miss it?
Essentially, if we're going to consider the killing of random assholes, I think this game wants to have its cake and eat it. Because, how do I put this? Like, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but, Ellie doesn't kill Abby.
Yeah.
But Ellie kills a lot of motherfuckers to get to Abby. And you could make, like, a whole nother game of, like, a motherfucker that she killed.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Can I finish what I was saying, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So in The Invisibles, there's a fundamental difference, which is that the guard in The Invisibles never become aware of that.
Okay.
Like, it's purely for us, the reader. We learn that this guy had a family and a kid and a backstory and everything. But he doesn't matter to the plot. And he's also just some guy. And what this does differently, and that I kind of don't like, is that the doctor that you killed was not some guy. He was the only person even theoretically capable, apparently, of making a cure. So it sort of wants to it wants to have its cake and eat it too, but I think in a different way than you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You're right.
Because this guy mattered specifically.
He was actually really... Yeah, I guess, to your point, it's almost like the opposite thing, where... this guy happened to be extremely important. But...
Yeah.
I guess we could have also guessed that, because how many surgeons are left...
Yeah, how many people? Because isn't he like actually like a veterinarian or something?
I really can't remember. That sounds right.
Because then that scene with the zebra.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's like one of the last even vaguely medically qualified people, at least that the Fireflies have.
If that's true, that's like they do that same thing in The Walking Dead, where their doctor is like a horse vet.
Because it's just anyone with some sort of medical degree.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind
That
of
makes sense.
that's a fun thing to do for like an apocalypse story.
Yeah. We could question whether he would have therefore had the resources to actually synthesize a vaccine. Yeah, and kill because I believe I might be remembering wrong, but I think I'm right that in the game you can actually find references to him. 'Cause
This
in the hospital
game
level,
or
you
the
find
first game?
no, the first game.
Okay.
You find like notes that he's done, and I believe even a recording of his voice in the first game if you do some exploring during the hospital section.
Oh, okay. I missed those.
Yeah, I think you can even find a recording of him talking about Ellie and talking about examining her. So we have that backstory for Abby, and then you get to the present, and Abby is going through the same 3 days in Seattle that Ellie went through in the first act.
Yeah, we're starting off seeing we have that flashback, and then we're at her base.
Right, and this is where, because this story gets way more into the weeds of like the wolves versus Seraphites conflict. That's really in the background with Ellie,
Yeah.
because she barely ever sees the Seraphites and is mostly just fighting the WLF. And this is probably the most, more than anything in the first game, an attempt to develop a political conflict within this setting.
Yeah, you got real... Because I guess the factions in the first game were pretty much just...
The government, Raiders, Fireflies.
Yeah.
Who are never even... Like, we never even see them fighting each other.
You see a bomb. That's what you see.
Yeah, we see the Fireflies planting a bomb in Boston, but, like, we never see government versus Raiders, or Raiders versus Fireflies, or directly government versus Fireflies. But
Yeah.
here, there's a big deal made of the conflict between the WLF and the Seraphites, because... So when you were playing as Ellie, you found newspaper clippings about this woman who was very religious and I think had a doomsday bunker and saved like a bunch of people in Seattle during the initial outbreak. And it seems to imply that she's going to become... that she is leading these people when you meet these religious zealots later as Ellie. And that she's going to be like a major villain in the game. But very early on when playing, after you fight some Seraphites, when playing as Abby, she just sort of in her like internal, or I guess talking to herself monologue, reveals that in fact the conflict started because this woman was taken hostage by the WLF after they came to power and killed. In their custody, accidentally or otherwise. It's unclear. So most of the early part of Abby's campaign is about this conflict with the Seraphites.
In her history of going, like, you know, establishing that she is that the top Scar killer, you know.
Yeah, because she and this little band of ex-Fireflies joined the WLF after the Fireflies collapse after Joel kills her father. Because now there's no hope for humanity, I guess. And so this is as good a time as any to mention that Neil Druckmann made a direct connection between the themes of this game and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Let's fucking go.
Right, that happened. There was an interview where he discussed... I'm going to look up what specific event he was talking about. The Ramallah lynching in 2000, in which a sort of riot broke out in the Palestinian territory, in which Palestinians killed 2 IDF reservists. And he talked about this as part of the general sort of as part of the ongoing conflict at the time, and generally part of the Second Intifada and an uptick in violence, Arab-Israeli violence. And so this game's themes about cycles of revenge and stuff like that were said by Druckmann himself, who parenthetically is Israeli, that those were inspired by that event specifically, and therefore the general history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Which is to note that I'm not pulling anything out of my ass when I talk about this.
Got it. So what are your feelings on that?
Well, it's notable that the way this game imagines political conflict is between a sort of militaristic, very evidently very militarized society, who wear these sort of olive green military uniforms, and a group of religious zealots, and treats the sort of origin point of this conflict as maybe the militaristic group's fault, but sort of murky, and that it's ultimately spiraled out into a cycle of revenge. And so I think it's fairly obvious to see a parallel here between that and the sort of a sort of flaccid liberal narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, in which everything is sort of so terribly complicated, and can't we all just get along?
So it's not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship.
And so the story doesn't really ever... And that is why, in Abby's campaign, that conflict eventually just becomes a background element.
And I was gonna say this when we were talking about it earlier, but I feel like, this game, like I said, it's pretty long. It's got a lot in it, and I almost feel like there's 2 or 3 different games in here. And I like the game of the Scar and Wolves conflict and the story, and later we get to Lee, and you have people who become bonded through just having to survive together and then becoming strangers of their own group. And that feels almost like it's... Obviously, it ties into the Ellie stuff, clearly. But I kind of like that story on its own, and it almost feels weird that you have that factional story and it's taking place within its own parallel between Abby and Ellie. Or it's... You get what I'm saying? It's not that it... And I don't even think it's necessarily a problem, but it's big, and it's long, and it's a lot. And since, generally speaking, the Ellie half didn't work as well for me, I was more captivated.
Yeah, which is the thing a lot of people have
by
problems
the
with.
second half, surprisingly
And so,
enough.
from that, we should mention... Okay, so eventually, Abby ends up linking up with 2 teenage Seraphite runaways.
Hey, before we get to that, I just want to reiterate, we get introduced to a few of her... Or I always forget the other guy's name, who gets fucking drilled by Tommy.
Manuel.
Yeah, it was like... I don't know, static TV for me. Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
he's kind of a nothing character.
Yeah.
He's Jesse, obviously. The parallels there.
Yeah,
but they're both the kind of nothing characters.
Okay, so that helps
So
me
maybe
understand
that's appropriate.
Yeah, that helps me understand my thoughts of like why I felt some of the parallels were silly, because they didn't feel... Jesse and Manuel didn't feel like characters. They, like I said, if those 2 specifically felt to exist so we can have a friend get drilled by the other friend.
Right, because they're parallel to each other, even in the fact that they're kind of nothing except friend of the main character, which is... Maybe that's genius. I don't know.
You know what? It's like you see the gears of the script going, which is again,
which is also something you can. Yeah, it's like we said about the first game. This is a competent script. This is written by people who have been in a screenwriting class before,
You're just missing a little flavor with those
Yeah.
characters.
It's
I don't
almost
think
too
there's
competent.
much. Oh, I guess there's not much to go over in the beginning. You just, you get to play fetch with some dogs. We talked about some of that.
Right, you play fetch with a dog that you killed already.
You
As
get to
Ellie.
understand, just the logistics of this group.
Right, you meet their leader, Isaac.
Yeah, again, Isaac really wasn't super interesting for me.
He's generic military dude.
Yeah, and again, with like, not to dwell on the pacing too much, but when we're talking cutscene gameplay ratio, it's like we just got out of, the super dramatic cutscene, and now we have to start off with like another slow setup part, and
Yeah.
it is what it is at this point. You're either along for it or you're not.
Right. And it's kind of inescapable because now you need to set up an entirely new protagonist.
Yeah, and that's why, and if you're not on board, if you're fucking hating this, and all of a sudden you're switching to Abby, and you have
Oh, it's
to
you're
go
done.
through-
That's going to be the breaking point.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
That's. So she sneaks, she goes to find Owen because Owen.
Yes, Owen has gone
killed a
AWOL.
dude. Yeah.
And apparently killed his partner who was on patrol with him. And so Isaac sends her to find Owen, and she ends up linking up with two teenage Seraphite runaways, Yara and Lev. And it emerges the reason they ran away is because Lev is transgender, and that is not acceptable to the Seraphites. I don't really have anything to say about that.
No,
Maybe
and
not
I
the
think.
person to talk about it.
Well, I guess I'd just say about the whole sequence is, I don't have much to say about this whole thing because it's pretty exciting, and
Yeah,
you have
I
like
really
the bit
do
where you're-
like because eventually this leads into a sequence where they've got bridges between buildings, and that's how the scars have been getting around this whole time. And that sequence is both sick as hell and feels weirdly out of place for a Last of Us game.
Yeah,
Like,
but I'm okay with it. It's fine.
yeah, it's the most Uncharted these games ever get.
Yeah, and they like fall through a building, and then I
Yeah.
think I talked about you fight like a giant rat. I know I'm jumping all over the
That's
place.
way later.
Yeah, but it's like it just seems like you're almost a little bit more set piece driven with this part.
You're a bit more
And-
video gamey.
Yeah, and it's kind of better, I
Yeah.
think.
And while they're doing that, they have a discussion about the Seraphites and about whether their founder would have really wanted this, which I think is weak and kind of bullshit.
So to go back, did we ever talk about Owen that much?
No, because Owen wasn't in the first part, barely.
Yeah,
this is where Owen becomes a
killed.
character. Yeah,
Now, how do you feel about Owen?
he's kind of boring.
Yeah, again, and I think to me this is what all these other like headier problems, but when you get down to it, it's like the Ferris wheel flashback. That's the one that I kind of wanted to take a nap during.
Yeah,
Because they're not really saying anything new. It's just that he's like, oh, you're really taking training seriously. I guess they set up that she's scared of heights. Not that that's super important. But, yeah, and then Owen, I mean, again, it's like, okay, Owen, and he gets there's a lady who's pregnant, and he gets her pregnant, but he still loves Abby, and you've got a little bit of love triangle. And the lady, Mel wants to
Yes.
go out with them on like a scouting adventure or something. I don't know why, I can't remember, but it's like, oh yeah, this is obviously a bad idea because she seems like pretty fucking pregnant.
yeah.
And then you already know it's like, oh, she's got to go out there so she can be killed by Ellie.
Right. That is something of a problem with this section. Is that a lot of the characters, you know what's going to happen to them. Which isn't always bad. But eventually she does find Owen, and there's a scene that's fairly infamous at this point, which is the fully fully nude sex scene.
It's fine.
It's fine, yeah. I get why people were talking about it, because it's like, I don't know, video games are movies now. Movies have sex scenes.
Yeah, and you know what? I guess if we want to compare other shit, like, I remember people talking about The Witcher 2's sex scene.
Yeah.
Which came out, like, in, well, I guess around the same time as the first Last of Us. And, and people always talking about this shit. People talked about, like, the first Mass Effect.
Right.
And
actually, this is interesting. So the first Mass Effect, people were mad at the sex scenes. Even though there's no nudity in that game.
You see, like, the side ass, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's it. But no one... Okay, but, like, Fox News was mad about Mass Effect.
Yeah,
like,
that's when
newspapers were mad about Mass Effect. No one outside of the gamer sphere was mad about this. Even though it is straight up, like, full nudity on screen.
No, and it was just people, like, it was gamers
thinking it's cringe.
PewDiePie could, like, squeal at it and go, oh my god.
But the newspaper, but the mainstream press, who, if this had come out 15 years ago, would have flipped their shit, did not care at all.
Which I guess it's not even the first sex scene in the game, because, Ellie and Dina, it cuts quicker.
But that's, like, PG-13... cutaway stuff. Like,
but
there's a clear difference
pretty fucking
that.
tame too. Like all things considered.
But you do see some titties.
Yeah.
In it, and that's like the big ooh thing.
Yeah.
Because
and not just that, it's a muscly
like,
woman. Yeah, it's a fucking muscly woman with titties, and that if you're already on the hate train, it's like, oh, this is mega cringe.
Yeah, but I just think I don't know if it's a sign that the mainstream, like, video games used to be the culture war lightning rod of bullshit, where it's like, oh my god, this is destroying our children. And I don't know what it is that made, like, genuinely full sex in a game no longer shocking to the mainstream media. If I had to guess, it's because the reason Mass Effect got everyone freaking out is because most people who were working at these legacy media outlets were older, and their primary view was video games are for children. Every video game's primary audience is children.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, people who are 35 don't believe that.
Yeah,
like,
I wonder
in 2020, people who are 35 and writing for the New York Times or whatever don't believe that at all.
Yeah.
Because they play video games.
I wonder if this ties in... I mean, maybe you could say it ties into, like, the Gamergate reactionary stuff. In the sense that...
In the sense that the right-wing position can no longer be games are bad.
Yeah. Just
and
like...
they should get rid of them.
Like I said, like that asshole Gavin McInnes, like... Or no. It was the gay Nazi.
I know you Milo... I don't want to be offensive to the lovely Greek people, but I cannot say his name. Yes, where, like, 2 days before Gamergate, he had this article on his shitty WordPress blog about how anyone who plays video games over the age of 15 is a loser. And that was, like, the conservative culture warrior position on video games before 2014, was that they are bad.
Yeah, and now it's like, and the last time I heard, like, mainstream conservatism was, like, Trump said some shit about violent video games at, like, one of the mass shootings.
Yeah, but he barely remembers to tie his shoes.
I know, that's what I'm saying, is, like, that's, like, the last time I remember...
Also, he is a, like, nearly 80-year-old man.
Yeah.
Like, he's old. But the guys who are 35 and writing for Ben Shapiro's shitty website,
they play
memo. Video games.
Well, this is how you... This is what... That's the dog in your fight is now to say... I mean, to say
too
that...
much diversity. Like, people...
You're putting lesbians and muscle women on our games.
Right.
You know?
But not the nudity. It's not the nudity itself, or the sexual content itself, or the violent content itself. All of which would have been insanely... The player character kills a pregnant woman.
Yeah.
You don't do it as the player, obviously. It's in the cutscene.
Yeah.
But still, Can you imagine if this game had come out in 2009? And what kind of insane cultural reaction there would have been.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
That would be hilarious. But no one cared in the mainstream press. No one cared.
And all this shit going on, and when I watched the scene, I was
It's
just
just
thinking...
nothing. It's boring.
No, well, specifically, I was thinking about when they take their shirts off, and I was like, that shit is like the most difficult thing to do, because if you pay attention in a lot of games, they will avoid showing characters changing clothes, because that's
because they figured out how to do it in Uncharted.
Yeah, it's like they really wanted this sex
I
scene
remember
because
people were
it's
posting
hard.
people were posting, not this because they would get flagged by Twitter, but the earlier scene you talked about where Ellie takes her tank top off and her back is all cut up and bruised.
Yeah,
because that's insanely hard. Like a slow, held shot of a character taking their shirt off is extremely difficult to animate with this type of rendering. So it's technically impressive.
Yeah, you know what? That's what you ever
That's a
see
weird
those...
thing to say about a sex scene.
Yeah, that is the weirdest. That's so prestige video games is like that is
looking
the most
at a sex scene and saying it's technically impressive.
well rendered, technically impressive sex scene I've seen.
Yeah.
I
can't imagine any movie where you would say that.
Yeah, the Source filmmaker Overwatch people really have to step up their game.
I'm glad I don't know what you're referencing. Don't explain it to me. Okay, so moving on from that. Shit goes nuts. Manny gets fucking drilled in the head by Tommy. And
no,
then...
that's way later, though, right?
Yeah, because I'm skipping a bunch of boring stuff.
Oh, well, okay, so I will say... I think the Tommy sniper battle is neat, just in the sense that... Now, did you guess that it was Tommy?
Obviously.
Yeah, and I appreciate... But I don't think that's bad.
I don't think you're supposed to even be questioning it that much.
Yeah, I like that they... Because you have that scene where you're sniping with Ellie. And I feel like that's kind of a setup that Tommy is like a crack shot sniper.
Right, because you have that scene where he and Joel are teaching Ellie how to shoot. Well, no, is it just him? Joel's not even there.
Yeah, it's
in
because
the flashback,
she's like mad
15.
at Joel, and they're talking
about it. Right, the flashback when
it.
she's 15 and she's doing long-range sniping. And so that sets up that and it's like a crazy powerful gun that kills everything in one hit.
Yeah, and so we'll get to fighting your friends a little bit later, but there is like a video game aspect. Okay, so sometimes you have these things where if you fight the protagonist of, not that Tommy's a protagonist, but you like fight a protagonist of like a previous game that you played as, it's like you have to respect them by making them hard.
Yeah.
In a sense, making them cool. And so I almost feel like that's a little bit what they're going for. It's like, yeah, he's supposed to be terrifying, but that's also awesome because Tommy's your buddy because he's on your scene, and you get to feel how cool he is by how much of a problem he's being to you. Like the more lighthearted way is like in the Yakuza games for people who play those.
Well, I really like the sequence just because it weirdly turns into a war movie.
Yeah, I like all that crawling.
And then there's like a dead body on the ledge above you, and he shoots it, and the head explodes, and all that stuff. And then, even if Manny's kind of a lame character, it is cool when he just gets his brains blown out.
I mean, I was shocked. Like,
yeah, when he's just talking, because he's the only one who we don't see die, so we don't know what happens to him, because Ellie didn't kill him. So when he's just mid-sentence, and then boom. That's pretty cool. Well, then we should... Okay, so I kind of skipped this, but there's a boss fight.
The Rat King.
The Rat King, which is really the only boss fight in the entire game.
Unless if you want to count the other two
it's the only one that occurs in the normal mechanics. Because the boss fight at the end of this section and the boss fight at the end of the game both take you out of the normal way of playing the game. And put you in this weird sort of mini-game, basically.
I guess the Ellie fight is a little bit more normal.
It's a little more...
But it's like the David fight, you know?
Yeah, but you're not... This is the only one where you have all your weapons and you're shooting it and blowing it up.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I would consider like a proper boss fight. Because it's a normal fight against a really hard enemy.
And I think I said this in the last episode, but, you know, it's video gamey as hell, and it's kind of fucking great. And it's
Because
one of the... It's the sequel thing where it's like, we gotta have something better than a bloater.
Because the bloater is the only real... The first bloater is a boss fight in the original game. Then bloaters become normal enemies.
Yeah. And this one we see, like, a few bloaters.
Yeah, but not that many.
Like, Ellie has a bloater boss fight, but, you know, it's like, we've seen that before.
Yeah, especially in the flashback, that's more of a boss fight.
Right.
The bloater you fight in the flashback. But, so it's the Rat King, because it's a bunch... So, Abby ends up at the end of the second day, which is episode, whatever, of her story. She ends up in the basement of the Seattle hospital, where you fought as Ellie in, part 1.
And this is where she's searching. They're trying to get drugs to help
Yara.
stabilize Yara. Yeah.
Yes, because Yara breaks her arm at the end of the first part of day 1. Yara breaks her arm, and so you end up below. You end up falling into the basement of the hospital, which was ground zero for the infection in Seattle, and it turns out the infected people in the basement have advanced to a stage where they fused together into a giant mass of human bodies that chases Abby, and then eventually you have to fight it. And yeah, it rocks.
It's probably the most horror that the game gets.
Yeah, but it's also the most meathead action too, weirdly.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a bit in the last episode.
Did, because you said you wanted Abby to tell someone about it.
Yeah, that was it. But, okay, so I guess I just want to reiterate, we didn't really talk about Yara and Lev a lot, but I like that their bond. I like the unspoken aspect of, like, Abby is this killer, this top scar killer, and why does she kind of grow conscious? Because it just kind of happens.
Yeah,
it's like we just happened to have the same interest, and now we had to survive together in a very tense, a fucking awesome thing where she has to beat a bunch of infected in with a hammer.
Yeah, that is cool.
And that's where you get a lot more zombie stuff, because that's why they're bonding together. Well, they bond to survive the Seraphites, but also just, the horrible zombies. And she sleeps with Owen, and then, she worries, if you remember, she, worries about them, and that's why she goes and seeks them out to find them again. Because she was she let them go on their way. And I just like that whole... it's an arc, but it's so understated. It's just like, shit, I care about these people because it just happened. And then that culminates with who's the big guy, the leader of the wolves?
I wanted to talk about the boss fight a little bit first.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
This boss fight against the Rat King. It's interesting because it is one of the most video gamey sections of the entire game.
Yeah.
Because it's a boss fight. It's fun because, it's interesting because the Rat King kills you instantly if he catches you. So you're constantly moving, and it's in a fairly dark environment, so you're constantly... And you're always looking for more ammo, because the Rat King will probably take all of the weapons you have to kill. It's
got that classic Resident Evil of... in Resident Evil, it's like it starts loading you up with a bunch of ammo, and you start getting suspicious, because you're like, what is this for?
Because this is right after you get the flamethrower.
Yeah, and it's like, what is this for, game developers? Are you going to throw something at me? And they do.
They do. But it's also interesting because it's pointless to the plot. This Rat King doesn't come up again. It's not even a follow-up to that much, any foreshadowing in part 1. It just kind of is a big thing that shows up, and then you kill, and then you move on.
For all
Okay.
the ballsiness of this game not giving a shit about cutscene length and how video gamey it does still feel like it has that obligation of we have to go bigger in this particular area.
Yeah.
We have to have more spectacle than the first game, because what the fuck are we doing if we don't have more spectacle in a video game? What are we making a sequel for on a next generation console?
Yeah. So, okay, so where you were with... So, yeah, you do all this stuff to save Yara. That's why Abby goes to the hospital, and that's why she leaves Owen after having sex with him at the end of day 2.
And that's why she's not there
For
when
the
her friends
invasion
get
of the
killed.
Scar Island. That's why she's not there when her friends get killed, and that's why
Yeah.
she's not there because the big thing of day 3, the big set piece there is the wolves are going to invade the Scars Island and just wipe them out. But she is gone AWOL. She's not going on that mission.
I have a question. Like, I forget. Do they say that this is about territory specifically? Like, are they like trying to fucking?
No, it's
like,
about
wipe
revenge.
them? It's like
The
not
Scars are
super-
religious fanatics, and they want to.
Yeah.
They kill the wolves because the wolves killed their leader, their founder.
I just couldn't remember if their leader Isaac was like if he had any specific goals, or was it just this, like we're gonna fucking end these guys?
These guys who keep killing us.
Yeah.
He wants to get rid of them because they're a problem.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Like, it was like genocidal, essentially.
Well, explicitly, because at the end, when she gets to the cabin where Lev and Yara are hiding, Isaac shows up.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say I like her. It's like, you know, it doesn't like, even though she hasn't like thought it's understated, and of course she makes that decision. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you kill these kids, and even though I've been killing for you guys all this time, it just kind of happened, and you know, now we're separated. She's alienated from her own group.
Right, but it's explicit there that Isaac's mission, he considers you a Scar from birth. And so even though Lev and Yara have gone AWOL from the Scars and left, he's just going to kill them.
Yeah, he's like,
He
put
doesn't
them
care.
down.
And even if they're children, he doesn't care. And so Yara shoots him and kills him, and then is shot by his soldiers, and she dies. So then at the end, it's just Lev and Abby to...
And if we want to talk about
escape.
some cool fucking... Well, you mentioned that, you know, the Tommy fight is like a war... Now we have the actual war.
Right. As you're in the burning Scar village, which is sort of the final area of Abby's campaign.
I guess this is why you can't put this... Because some people have talked about, it's like, you know, what if you swapped Ellie and Abby's order? And you can't do that in a more, you know, pacing sense, because you can't put that amazing war spectacle fight at the beginning.
Right, you'd have to totally... Because the whole thing is that all this Scar versus Wolf conflict is in the background during Ellie's campaign. You don't even really know what's going on. You don't even know what the Scars / Seraphites are. They're just assholes in robes who try to kill you.
That whistle.
That whistle. And so, yeah, if you put Abby first, and so you know everything that's going on with them when Ellie shows up, it would make fighting them as Ellie not feel notable. Because you're like seeing a weird glimpse of a conflict. Because in the way it is now, you see a glimpse of this conflict, and then you get a more detailed view of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would work quite as well if you saw the very detailed view of the conflict and then saw like if Isaac, because Isaac gets mentioned a ton by WLF fighters in Ellie's campaign.
Right.
But you never see him. And it'd be weird if you'd already met Isaac and knew that he dies.
Yeah.
That would
but
not really
you
work.
still have the weirdness of Abby's friends. But, I mean, yeah, it's not...
That's deliberate.
Yeah, that's deliberate, and then I guess my question is, so that doesn't work switching the order. Would it work if you just had a story about scars and wolves and one character, and characters from each faction who find themselves aside from their own factions, could they have...
Like if you cut off all connective tissue to the first game.
If you wanted to make the game where we're not doing direct sequels, we're just telling a
Right.
story in this world, if we were going that route, like, do you think that would work? I understand that you have to, like, from a finance perspective, no, you need Joel and Ellie. But
because they're
just
marketable.
artistically, do you think
I
there's
think it
enough
would be
meat
a
there?
very different story. Like, I assume you'd have to add a ton more, because that would require sort of trimming out everything having to do with the first game.
Yeah, you would and you wouldn't, because this game is 20 hours long,
So you could just make, a 6-hour game about...
Or I mean, shit. I mean, like, I don't know how long Abby's section is, but, it's probably a good 6 to 8 hours, and
Yeah, but you'd have to cut a lot of Abby's section.
Right.
A lot of Abby's, none of the flashbacks mean nothing if they're not about the events of the first game.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, all those flashbacks, and, like, you'd basically have to change the entire structure of the story if we're assuming that this is just a new main... Like, the game would be a different game if it were a different game.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I don't know what that means.
There's only so much use pontificating on it, but
like, we can imagine a hypothetical.
I guess what I'm saying, it's easy for me to imagine it because I like that section in isolation, and it is my favorite part. And I mean, just continuing with that thought, the whole in the middle of the battle, pretty fucking awesome, pretty rad.
Yeah, when you're moving through as they're killing each other, and the burning villages and stuff.
Fighting the big dude was a little over the top, but why not?
Yeah.
Why the fuck not?
But at the end of that, Abby
what's over the
loses
top about it is that they do that shit in Uncharted 3, where it's like, this guy is just big, which means that his bullets don't work as well on him, and you have to fist fight him.
That's an entire class of enemy in Uncharted 3.
Yeah, you know what? It's just another pattern of, like, if you want the more video gamey elements, Abby's half is better.
Yeah. But, okay, so at the end of this, Abby loses all of her shit. Yeah, like all the weapons that you'd been gathering the whole campaign. And then makes her way to the aquarium, where you find Owen and... What's Owen's girlfriend's name?
Mel.
Owen and Mel's bodies, and then we're back where we were at the end of Ellie's campaign, with Abby rolling up into the theater and shooting Jesse in the head, and shooting Tommy in the leg. And the head. But not killing him.
How do you feel about this boss fight?
I like it a lot.
Interesting.
Because now the final boss of the second act of the game is Ellie. And Ellie specifically is using all of the skills that you used and that you learned to use during her campaign.
Yeah,
she's using the shotgun, she's using the arrows, she's planting trip mines.
There's something kind of silly about the fact, like, that's right, you're facing an enemy who can crouch walk as good as you.
I guess. But I like that aspect, that it's like using stuff and I'm trying to think about what that does to the player, like, emotionally.
So, I'll tell you, because I didn't, I've got mixed feelings about it. I mean, it works. It overall works. But, it goes without saying that, if you hate Abby, this, of course, doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
But even if, so, like I said, I never had a problem with playing as Abby, and I like her section.
Yeah.
But there is, like, a weird feeling of, you make the goal.
You don't want to kill Ellie.
yeah, you don't. No matter how much it's the goal, and you understand that this is, on rails. I'm not pressing the buttons as hard as usual. I don't actually want to, and I think that's an underrated feeling because I always go to Wolfenstein because it's like, that game is special because it makes it feel it more when you're shooting Nazis. There's an emotional weight to it, and you really want to fucking kill those Nazis.
Right.
And there are games where I feel, in The Last of Us, I feel conflicted about killing these people. But then you have this where it's like, I also know that I'm not going to kill her, or at least that's my best guess. And there was I brought up the YouTuber Matthew Matosas for making the horrible analogy for gameplay extroverts and introverts, but probably his more salient point was that this part of the game lost him because at this point it felt like he was just puppeteering, like he had two different sock puppets on each end, and if we're getting like heady,
it's a video game.
Yeah, but there's something different when you stay in the perspective of one character, or you're staying in the perspective of characters that share the same goals, and now you're just flipping on this part feels like you're playing out a script more than any other part of the game. Because I just don't have any real investment in actually wanting to kill Ellie. And that's that's not necessarily a problem either, but it is weird.
This is a cliche, but that is the point. I know I keep saying that, but I think that's 100% the intended reaction. That you feel this weird disconnect from the characters. Because you're trying to kill Ellie, and you want to succeed because you want the story to keep moving.
Well, I have another example. I have another example later on, so I'll put a pin in that.
Okay.
But so yeah, I agree. That right there is the point. But I have a example later at the final boss fight where I don't think it works at all as intended.
Okay.
So there's the fight. Do you buy the fact that Abby's not gonna fucking kill Dina and Ellie? She's gonna let her go after all this shit? Lev is the one that basically helps her not to.
Right. And that's because there's an obvious parallel being drawn between Lev and Ellie in the first game.
You ever get the sense that the real lesson of this game is leave no survivors?
Maybe. I don't know. Well, I'll get to that in the third part. But, yeah, I mean, do I buy it? I don't really know what that means.
I thought it's I don't know. Is she really make that decision after all?
I don't know.
It almost feels. Yeah.
She's not real.
Fuck off. I'm not. That's not what I'm arguing. I wonder if it's playing too much to the fact that it's Ellie can't die because we know Ellie, and then the rest of the plot wouldn't happen, and then Lev. I don't know. It's fine.
I think it's fine. I don't really.
Fine.
I can't say if that's, I don't know. Yeah, it's fine.
Well, I guess the answer is yes. You buy it then.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And then we move into the third part of the game. This game has 3 acts.
Where you herd sheep.
Yes. Where it's a year later and Ellie and Dina have been living on a farm. It's doing some Norman Rockwell-ass bullshit.
It is so fucking idyllic. It's
golden
crazy.
fields of wheat, and I know why. I get it because. So yes, but Ellie is having panic attacks and PTSD flashbacks to the events in Seattle and to Joel's death. But otherwise, she seems to pretty much have it made as far as the post-apocalypse goes.
I thought it was a bit weird so I could be misremembering, but I thought the PTSD was pretty focused on Joel getting killed.
Yeah.
And I guess I think that's a bit weird just because it does call into the whole question of how seriously are we meant to take the gameplay violence, because it's like, well, what about the PTSD of that one time where I laid a mine and a dog exploded, and then I took someone hostage and shot his friend and then slit his throat, and then did that a bunch more other times. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, but like the PTSD centering on Joel's death makes sense.
No, I get
'Cause
it. I guess
that
it's
was
just, for
someone
me,
she
it's-
cared about being killed without her being able to do anything about it.
I guess it's just, for me, it's like it's pushing the limits of, like I said, how seriously are we supposed to take, how this intense slaughtering that we do as just the meat and potatoes motions. But yeah, I mean, it's not like a huge problem. It's just a thought that I had.
Okay. But so the reason this setting has to be so idyllic is because Tommy shows up and he says he's found Abby and that they need to go to Santa Barbara, or Ellie, because Tommy's leg is fucked up.
Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that it's a surprise he's alive.
Right, because it seems like Abby shoots him in the head, but I guess it doesn't pierce his skull or something.
Yeah, it
Because
just
he
got him
shows
in
up-
the eye.
Yeah, but he shows up with a bad limp, and he's like, look, because Abby shot him in the leg, he can't go after her. So Ellie needs to go to Santa Barbara and kill Abby.
And his wife left him.
But that's not why he can't go.
And she took the fucking kids.
I don't think they had kids,
She took the dog.
I guess. But Ellie's wife is going to leave and take the fucking kids. If she goes. Because that's the conflict, right? Where Ellie has a family now, basically.
Right.
And a pretty good life. And then she's got to make the choice of whether to leave and be loyal to Joel and Joel's memory or stay. And she chooses to leave. She makes the wrong choice. Blah, blah, blah. Shakespearean tragedy, whatever.
It's
She makes the wrong choice.
It's a painful moment. I mean,
Yeah,
it pretty much
it's
worked
a well
on
done
me.
scene. It worked, yeah.
So, I kind of do understand where some reviewers I was reading did find this game just too depressing for them. Not
Yeah.
not trying to say that it was wrong or anything, but this YouTuber named SkillUp noted that in The Last of Us you have the fucking giraffes, and this one does have, if you could quantify the amount of hope in a game, this one feels like it's got less of it.
That's fine.
Yeah, it is fine, but I can also
We'll get to that
understand.
with the themes, but I don't care about hope.
Yeah.
Fuck
I
hope.
mean, I'm just saying I understand if, that can be off-putting to some people. Yeah, so were you expecting there to be this much game left? Because I was a little caught off guard.
I was expecting it.
Okay.
Because I was assuming it was a 3-act structure. Because after this,
well, good on you.
we briefly play as Abby again, in which she explores Santa Barbara, and then,
I completely forgot about that.
and then gets ambushed, and then the Lev gets punched. In what
Oh, and she
became a
finds the
meme.
fireflies, right?
She finds the fireflies on Catalina Island.
Yeah.
And then Lev gets punched, and they get taken hostage by these new assholes who show up. And then Ellie arrives in Santa Barbara, fights her way down from the coast into the town, and we meet the third enemy human faction in this game, the Rattlers,
Which are slavers.
who are slavers. They own slaves, rattling chains, and they also have a rattlesnake emblem. Get it? And they also
What are they doing with these slaves?
growing stuff. I think, 'cause I think they mentioned they have like fields where they grow fruit and shit.
Yeah, it just
So I
made me
it is
think
a
of
plantation straight up. I mean, it's California,
Yeah.
so it's probably fruit.
Yeah. And don't forget to mention Ellie escaping death by being a badass, which is, that's a
Yes.
cool moment. Just a cold
Yeah, and she gets bitten
move.
again.
Yep.
That's what you call it's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah.
It's what you call a bookend to a story, because Ellie obviously started, she got bitten, and then it turns out in Left Behind she got bitten, and whatever.
Yeah.
And
then
you
have go ahead.
You get the silenced machine gun in this section.
Because this section has to be, the mechanical high point where we throw
Right.
everything at you. We have enemies that can withstand headshots.
Right, yeah,
know.
this is the only time in the game where you get enemies that that have figured out you can wear armor on your head.
Yeah, and you have
so you
an
can't
automatic
just one shot.
rifle, which is what they did in
submachine
the
gun.
first game.
Yeah, the only in the first game, the final area is the only area where you get an automatic weapon of any kind. Because you have the assault rifle in the hospital section in the first game, and then you have the silenced submachine gun in this game, which is even better than the assault rifle because it is a gun with a silencer that doesn't break. Because your two options for distant stealth kills in this game are arrows, which have been made much weaker than they were in the first game.
Harder to aim.
Much harder to aim. There's a lot more of a curve to them than in the first game. And it takes much longer to aim them. And you can build silencers for your pistol, but they require resources and they only last 3 shots.
Yeah, they're implied to be like the oil can fucking silencers or whatever.
Not implied. They are like straight up.
Yeah.
Like fucking what are they? Like soda cans.
Yeah, and you get
That
to
you're taping to
do
your gun.
zombie human shenanigans.
Right, because the Rattlers are unique because they're the only time we've seen in the games where humans have sort of quote unquote domesticated zombies, where they have clickers that they use as a security system.
Right.
Because the clickers will detect things that they can't see. And of course you can shoot the chains on the clickers and release them and have them kill some of your human enemies.
So I'm a dumbass, and I didn't figure out shooting the chains, so my first move was to take a guy hostage and walk him over to get fed by one.
That's awesome.
Which, I guess, if you were really persistent and careful, you could do that to, like, every enemy.
I guess. That would be hilarious. But I think you're supposed to work it by shooting the chain.
Oh, you are, but I was too dumb to... Well, you can go up and press triangle to let them loose, but that's
Right.
risky, because they might just come for you.
Right, but if you shoot the chains with the silenced machine gun...
Man, I'm so
you can
fucking
break
dumb.
Yeah, but that's an interesting new twist. But the Rattlers are like the closest any enemy in the game comes to being stormtroopers.
That's what I was going to bring up, is that it feels a little bit weird, or it's almost like a necessity, because...
They're not gonna be here very long. We're introducing them in the last quarter of the game.
And we need an enemy. If Ellie is going to make an emotional choice about not killing someone...
We need the people she kills to get there to be huge pieces of shit.
Yeah, to just absolutely have it coming.
Right.
And I don't know how I feel about that either.
Because that's what happens. You fight them. Eventually Ellie frees a bunch of prisoners, and it's implied that the slave rebellion destroys the Rattlers. But she comes to the posts where where Abby and Lev have been tied up. On big posts, basically to wait for the tide to come in and kill them.
Yeah, which shouldn't they be
interesting-
working the fields or
No, they
something?
say Abby tried to fight back.
Oh, okay.
No, they because you overhear them. This is how you find out how Ellie finds out where she is. She overhears 2 of the Rattlers talking, or no, she's interrogating one of them. The
Oh,
one she
yeah,
gets the
yeah,
machine gun
yeah.
from, and he says, "Yeah, she tried to escape, so we put her on the posts."
Oh, right. And they do a little twist where you see like a long-haired woman
Yeah,
that you think is her, and then no, it's actually because they cut her hair.
right. But you also have that adds the interesting wrinkle that if Ellie had done nothing, Abby would have died.
Yeah, and that's why I thought the direction this was going, which I guess it was up until the end, is that they were just gonna oh, well, I accidentally saved you and I'm really tired now, let's just go home. And that's what they want you to think, because all of
Right.
a sudden she remembers Joel, and I don't know.
They're going to the boat because Abby knows where a boat is, so she cuts down Abby and cuts down Lev, and they start rushing for the boat.
Yeah, and
But then, in the water, outside the boat, Ellie is like, actually, fuck you. I need to kill you. Which, in fairness, is the only reason she's come all the way to California.
yes.
This was evidently a hard journey on her. I mean, it was from what we played and from we can presume happened before this. So then they have their big final battle, which is the exact same as the final battle from Uncharted 4. Using the exact same mechanic.
That's
but it has a
not
dodge
fair.
button.
Yeah.
But otherwise...
how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this, just this fight? This final confrontation?
In terms of gameplay or what?
All of it.
So, other than ripping off the sword fighting mechanic from Uncharted, ripping off, it's the same guy.
Just
But,
having
reusing.
for your final boss fight, we're just gonna simplify it because it's more about the spectacle and thematic elements.
That's the correct choice.
Yeah.
This shouldn't be a gunfight. It should obviously be bare knuckles just beating the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
Which is right. That's correct. So I think that's right. Constantly trying to drown each other. I think that works. Ellie gets her fingers bitten off. Is it her right hand or her left hand?
It would be her left hand because
her
that's
left
the
hand.
one you need to do the frets
To
in
do
a
the guitar. Yeah, to touch
Yeah.
the strings, the 4 strings. So she
'Cause
gets
yeah.
the front 2 digits of the second 2 fingers on her left hand bitten off during the fight. And then eventually she gets to a point where she could kill Abby, but she chooses not to.
All right, so now to pull that pin out that I was talking about earlier, I failed a QuickTime event. So
Okay.
you're pressing square to drown her.
Right.
And what I was talking about, where it's like, I empathize with Abby enough now
To not want to kill her.
yeah, I don't want to kill her. And so I didn't really make a conscious choice, but I was just kind of like slowed down pressing square. I was like, do I really have to do this? And you do. And I got fucking killed.
Yeah.
But it's like, that loses me, because it's like, now it's like, I think we talked about what video games are, what they can do. And ultimately I'm like, all right, you can make a video game.
I think this is kind of clever what you're pointing at.
Yeah, we're talking about like what does the interactive medium hold for us, and I can't help but feel it's like, yeah, there is some lost potential when I made the decision to not kill Abby, but I still have to go through the motions because this game is so uninteractive at key moments because it has to, go with its script.
Right?
And
Wouldn't it? Huh? Here's a question. Wouldn't it be interesting if the way to end the game, the way to win, is to not push the button?
Like
the
pushing
game
the button
prompts
is a
you.
failed QuickTime
Right.
event.
That pushing the button fails you, and the way to actually succeed is to stop.
That would be kind of neat,
'Cause
but
then
I
if-
also can't help but feel like the better choice is to avoid a situation like that. Just
How?
have the movie play out,
That's a terrible idea.
Wait, not having you press the square button, because you can choose that as an option.
Yeah,
You could
I
just
mean-
turn off QuickTime events.
Yeah, I guess.
That's
You could
already
just-
in the game.
Yeah, I guess. Just have it be an on rails, just a cutscene of her.
Yeah, and it just goes to my overall feelings where it's like, I don't know, maybe there's a limitation to what you can do with this type of game that completely doesn't ignore player input, but you're not going outside of this script, and there's barely any maneuverability. In fact, the only maneuverability is that you can sometimes get through certain bits without killing all of the people. I thought it was interesting. I found this out on a random YouTube recommendation that first section where you're Abby fighting wolves, if you get through it without killing as many people, Lev has different dialogue.
That's interesting.
And I can't help but feel it's like you gotta have some sort of player input with the narrative. And even if it's really small, but if you don't, you're right, you don't. And I feel like I never had these feelings in The Last of Us 1. And because even if you don't want
choices,
even if you don't want to kill the doctors, I don't know, like that section just, there's something particular about that moment with like where I have to try really hard with this. I've got a fucking, pound square button at something I'm not where, and I guess I kind of just knew where. Oh, I know where this is going, and
right.
And so that was just a weird moment. And I don't,
you don't want to kill the doctors, Joel does.
Yeah,
like fully, he does.
And in this one,
I guess scene is going to end with Ellie deciding she doesn't want to kill.
Maybe it's not that interesting of a problem. Maybe it's just the classic problem of in Call of Duty, sometimes, you're keep dying to get through a level, and then you get to the end of the level, and you're supposed to die in the on-rails cutscene. And maybe this is just another version of that. I don't know.
Yeah. But then, there's not much to talk about after this point. Abby goes off on the boat.
Except some people debate that Ellie should have killed Abby.
What do they mean by that? Do they mean if Ellie was real?
I've heard argument. No, just
or
the arguments I've heard that it's both. I've heard arguments narratively, which that doesn't make sense because I guess you could go that way and have an even more nihilistic ending. Yeah. But I've also heard that. What is Ellie not killing Abby for? What drives that decision to not kill her? Because I don't want to press square because I know Abby at this point. Why does Ellie not want to?
Abby didn't kill her.
Yeah, twice. But after already going through all this shit and murdering, her way through these slavers just to get...
Yeah, but like you mentioned, you need those guys to be just colossal pieces of shit.
But if she's not gonna do it, then what if there was the ending where she just went on the boat and realized, and you didn't have to have the boss fight? Because ultimately it is just the decision of, oh, I'm not actually going... she decides to fight Abby and then decides not to kill her. It's... You know what? Okay, I found... This is what's bothering me.
Uh-huh.
I think it's designed in a way that it still satisfies the player's need. I could be wrong about this, but it's it satisfies the player's need that Ellie is still top dog and that you get to, win that Abby. Fight. Yeah, so Ellie gets to win the fight, and, she just wins from, a mano-a-mano contest, and that and her decision to not kill her, that makes it cooler, in the sense, because I could have killed you, but I didn't, and she gets the last word, in a sense.
Yeah. It makes it cooler, but...
Yeah.
It makes it more meaningful, in a sense, too.
Yeah, that too.
The fact that killing her would have been easy at that point.
Yeah, because I guess you don't know if she's really making that decision.
Yeah, because if she just backs down without the fight, then it does come off like it may have just been exhaustion.
I guess before,
or fear that she would lose.
I guess before I was thinking it's well, of course Ellie would win because, Abby's starving. But I guess they try and that's why she gets stabbed in the side.
Gets stabbed,
to equal out the fight.
She's been bleeding for about an hour from a pretty bad stab. So yeah, Abby is dehydrated and starving on this pole for a day or something.
Yeah.
But Ellie has been bleeding for a while, so I think that's, but yeah, that is supposed to be what makes it kind of even.
Yeah, and I think that's a weird thing of like, we need to have an even, we need to set up this stuff so we can have these two characters have an even fight in this game, and you know,
I don't think it's even in the sense of like, oh, if Batman fought Superman, who would win?
yeah,
I think it's dramatic in the sense you don't know who's going to win. But I don't think it's meant to be even in some absolute sense of proving who's better.
I guess that's kind of it for my thoughts on that. And you're right. Fight's over.
Fight's
Abby
over,
takes the boat.
Abby leaves. Abby and Lev leave. And then Ellie goes home to the farmhouse, which is empty now. And then she tries to play a sad song, but can't because she fucked up
And
her
she's a
hand.
fucking quitter because you could still whip something together with two fingers on a guitar.
Oh, on a guitar. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do so. You could play some blues rock or something. And she's gonna need the blues with her girl leaving her.
Yeah. Well, then she walks off into the forest ambiguously, and that's the end of the game.
Now, are we expecting another?
No. I mean, it feels. It feels about as complete as the first game.
Right.
Like it
It's-
feels thematically and narratively complete, like the first game did.
They probably just left it open.
It's open enough.
yeah.
You know, we don't
You
know
could do
where
it.
Abby. We don't know where Ellie is going at the end. We don't know what Abby found on Catalina Island. Right. Ellie just sort of leaves the farmhouse, but whether she's going back to Jackson or somewhere else or whatever, we don't know. And we don't know if Abby will find the Fireflies.
I'm envisioning like a scribbled down like notes for a sequel that's like Ellie, gives herself over to make the cure ? For
Yeah,
third
that's
game?
like a theory. I've seen that as a fan theory. But obviously that's not even really implied.
No,
If they wanted to
that's
imply
why.
that,
Yeah.
she would have gone to Catalina Island.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it's like I could imagine that if they're like throwing darts at the board, that that's already
Yeah.
one of their ideas.
That's definitely something they've tossed around, I think.
Don't do that, actually.
No, because there's another interesting thing that I think is kind of a nice touch, which is the menu screen for the game.
Oh
The
yeah.
whole game is the boat.
Folks, we love changing menu screens.
Right. So the boat shaking, and that seems meaningless until the final fight, which happens there at the dock with this rowboat, and it's sort of swaying, or I think it's a speedboat swaying in the surf, and then eventually that is where you have the final battle. But after the game ends, it's that boat, but instead of being in a rainstorm on a dock, it's beached in the sun.
Right.
And it's presumably on Catalina Island, where Abby and Lev have found the Fireflies.
Just to give you that little extra, like,
Bit
yeah,
of closure.
they made it.
A bit of closure.
They made it.
Where it's like, yeah, they do get there.
You know what? Shout
nice.
out to menu design.
Yeah, that's a smart touch. Because after you get the final cutscene and it reloads the menu, it's like, oh, that's nice. And it does make the reveal of the boat in the final battle, have a weird resonance, because you've been looking at that every time you open up the game. You've been looking
you
at that boat.
subconsciously know that significance.
Yeah, you've been looking at that boat and not knowing what it means for the entire game every time you boot it up.
So, but before we get to that article, I just like you finished the game. How are you feeling about it? Just general thoughts.
That was pretty good.
And despite some of my odd opinions, my thought would be just one step below, which would be that was all right, I guess.
Like, I obviously have criticisms of it.
Yeah, and I think I told you while not recording, my ultimate thought was it's not good enough for me that I wouldn't have rather just like had the first game in isolation by itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, but let's move on. What do you want to say about this Polygon's review?
So
of Last of Us
Polygon's
2?
review is very much in line with a lot of the reaction to Last of Us, because It opens with its sort of subheading is, "Did you know murder is wrong?" And then it says, "The Last of Us Part 2 depicts the future, yet it fails to escape its own past," which is one of those lines. Okay, college freshman. Sorry to be bitchy about that, but that's a terrible line. This depicts the future. Anyway.
You know, it's Polygon. What can you do? You know.
The thesis is, it's Polygon, which is why making me read this is a war crime. But the thesis is basically that you don't. It's like, oh, it's just about revenge and you're murdering people, but it thinks murder's wrong, and about how, I guess, nihilistic it is, at least in this writer's estimation. And it just gets into a ton of weird and really bullshit assumptions that I don't like. I'm going to quote a paragraph from this that really sort of got under my skin. "Ellie embraces the role of anti-hero, just as Joel did, and Naughty Dog makes its queer woman protagonist act just as violent and self-involved as the legions of grizzled straight white dude video game protagonists who have preceded her. There's something that feels off about that straightforward swap. It's a missed opportunity to explore the rage of a marginalized character might take on a different form and what that form may look and sound like." That really annoys me, and I'll explain why. I don't know. It feels like it's like... So, this game is fairly diverse, you know? Its main character is a lesbian. It's got a very prominent transgender supporting character. Racially, it's... there's prominent Asian and black characters and stuff. And I think this person is annoyed that a game is diverse, but still, I don't know, nihilistic and violent, because I think they have this thing in their head where those are conflicting values.
Okay, if I wanted to be charitable, I think I agree. It's like that's kind of silly. But if I were being more charitable, I guess I would say is we have all this diversity, but we're still kind of the generic third-person murder spree game. I mean,
right.
That's not what they're saying. But,
that's not, because they're not talking about gameplay at all.
At the same time, it's like there is just an absolute dearth of wonderful queer indie games that
dearth is the wrong thing to say that. You mean a glut?
A glut of non-violent indie games. Like,
well, then go play one of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go play. I don't know. I don't know what you fucking expected when you picked up this game. That you're like. So hang on. So this all ties into, in my estimation, the hope punk phenomenon.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to send you Simon McNeil's genealogical sketch of hope punk, which I think is genius. But basically, it's this idea. It equates like comfort in storytelling with like. I feel like this author is buying into this equation of like being soft and being nice and being comfortable with being progressive, and that's why they feel this weird disconnect. Where this is a AAA video game with a queer woman lead, but it doesn't make them feel good. You know?
Yeah.
It's still mean, like narratively mean and violent. But not in a way that's like, because you can't really argue that anything that happens to Ellie is like plays into any specific stereotypes or something.
No.
But so they can't argue that.
And I've heard of various takes about Lev.
Right.
I mean, and like I said, it's like I don't know what to make. I thought he's a pretty great character.
Yeah,
and I like, and I also really like just a little bit of religious persecution, and we didn't even talk about that. The reason he runs away is to go back and see his mom.
Yeah,
which seems like really stupid and illogical, but I've understood that feeling of like even though your parents have said that's like, we're not going to accept this about you. It's like, well, let me give it one more go.
Yeah,
'cause maybe
if I could
this
go,
time.
maybe this Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
my dad
yeah,
won't yell
maybe.
at me. You know?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Yeah, that's a very sweet and human feeling.
So from that perspective, I thought Liv
that was great.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like it's. I feel like they're demanding hope punk. I feel like they're demanding that stories make you feel good, and they shouldn't. So I'm also going to read this paragraph, the ending paragraph. The Last of Us Part 2 depicts people who are. Hang on. Oh, so this is the third paragraph. I see a widespread level of selfishness and an intense care for the preservation of human life in the real 2020. I see a widespread level of selflessness and an intense care for the preservation of human life in the real 2020. In fact, and an increasingly loud demand for a society that meets that need. Our systems have failed in large part, but individual people remain strong and kind. Things have rarely been worse, but there is hope to be found in the actions of average folks fighting to do the right thing. I can't stop laughing. We don't need a video. Oh, and it's all about how the COVID-19 response proves that people are good and fundamentally not selfish.
That's
so it's 2022.
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Half of Americans will shoot you if you wear a mask. They will kill you. Not if you tell them to wear one. If you wear one, they will kill you.
Yes.
Everyone, like, this is blisteringly naive. But hey, we sure did fix all those systematic problems when we elected Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Like, unbelievably naive. In its analysis of the coronavirus pandemic is insane. Completely wrong. And kind of ending like that undercuts the entire argument this article's making.
You know, and the more honest version of this is like the Skill Up review, where he basically said is like, look, I wasn't feeling this, you know? Like, he was just talking about his personal feelings.
Right.
It's like,
it's
I wasn't
fine to
feeling
not
this.
feel it, but this person is tying into, like, the game is philosophically wrong, and the proof is that Americans have all come together because of COVID-19. Which is just fucking wrong.
Right. Just... I think I talked about the last episode where it's like, you know, this game is accidentally of the time a bit, you know?
It's right. The game is right. Well, it's of now. It's not of the time it came out. It's of now.
Of the time, which that time is now.
Yes. My time is now. So this review, I did see, interestingly, recently, I saw a tweet thread by, I'll send you a link to their Twitter, by a tweet thread by a podcaster I like named Esther, who played through the game for the first time, and came away with an interesting conclusion that the game should have been meaner. Basically the opposite of this stupid polygon.
No, I could see that.
The game, like you mentioned the ending.
Right.
And that the game feels like it needs to be, like, morally wrapped up. Whereas the game would have worked better as just a hyper-violent, basically an exploitation movie.
Yeah, but
like
I almost feel like that's even more...
revenge-driven exploitation movie.
That's like even more generically video gamey in a set. But you're
yeah,
you know,
but
that is
more
right.
Awesome.
It does feel you know what I'd say? It feels uncanny in a way where it's like we're kind of in between spots of you're right. It's very mean, but
still it has to be like, ooh, revenge is bad, and the character will make the right choice at the end.
Oh, so this is what you were talking about, where it's like, wouldn't it have been fucking awesome if the lesson was, you know, you should not leave survivors. And that's why the first game is ultimately...
Like the lesson. Fuck lessons.
No, that's a great lesson. It's so practical. It's like, no, do not show mercy.
Yeah, Joel fucked up by not killing everyone in that hospital.
Wait, did he kill every... Oh, he killed everybody he could.
Abby was there. He should have stayed.
That's why the first game is better, because it just ends with, like, I will kill everybody in this room, and it's done.
Yeah, but, yeah, just like, the fact the game feels the need to be like, ooh, but we're still good. Like, we're still moralizing to you. Instead of embracing this kind of 70s exploitation nihilism that it easily could have.
Okay. Any other things you want to talk about with this article in particular?
I've talked about Hope Punk and like, I don't really think so. I might sound insane when I talk about Hope Punk.
No. I mean,
I hope.
whatever. Somebody knows. I know what you're
Let's
talking
link the
about.
article I sent you.
I guess it's time to move on. I think we've done this game justice.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost 2 hours, and this is our second part.